This is ODAT Chat, your instant connection to recovery and community, one day at a time. This podcast may contain strong language, sexual content, and spiritual truth. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to ODAT Chat. My name is Arlina, and I'll be your host. If you haven't yet, don't forget to subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher so you don't miss out on any upcoming episodes. You can always listen directly from the website at odatchat.com or from the ODAT Chat Facebook page. ODAT Chat is a podcast where my guests and I talk about addictions and all the paths to recovery. We largely focus on unpacking the issues that cause addiction and how it affects us, but also on all the paths to recovery, so including 12 steps, different exercises, teachers, and ideas that contribute to recovery. So there is a lot of mainstream media exposure of alcoholics and addicts of all kinds. That doesn't seem to be from people who are actually experiencing addiction, and frankly, that really bothers me. So I wanted to provide a platform so that we can all tell our own stories of what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. So today's episode is with my dear friend Maitreya. Over the last 4 years that I've known her and participated in her recovery, I have had the privilege to witness her struggles, the work she has executed on, and now watch her reap the rewards of all her efforts. My experience with her has been extraordinary. Every time I have met with her, I have walked away in awe of her and her willingness and ability to be vulnerable and honest, and I got to witness the insights and revelations that she got. So truly, she is a gift in my life, and I'm honored she participated as a guest on the podcast. So please feel free to say hi to her at odatchat.com or on the Facebook page, the ODAT Chat Podcast. So with that, please enjoy this episode with Maitreya. Well, Maitreya, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, so we have worked together for how many years now?
I think we're going on 4.
4 years. Okay, yeah, it's been a great run, and you are moving. So it's so bittersweet for me because I've watched you grow and change, and you've worked so hard, and now you're going to blossom into this new space that you're moving to, and you're letting go of some things that were really challenging, and I'm super excited for you, but I'm so sad that we won't be, meeting regularly and stuff. But
yeah, I'm going to miss you.
Yeah, but I thought, you know what, this will be a great way to sort of not say goodbye, but sort of kind of end a chapter a little bit. And
you're going to fire me on the air.
No, I was about to cry. I'm like, thank God you said that. But no, so this is just the next chapter, so it's a good way to mark the change in our lives. So thank you so much for being willing to come on.
Yeah, thank you.
So the way I usually start the podcast is a little bit of like age, rank, and the serial number so that people listening can kind of get an idea of who you are. And so you're a petite little thing. How tall are you?
5'3".
5'3". I know, we're about that. Okay, so we're like virtually the same height.
I believe I'm taller.
That is debatable.
Slightly.
And how old are you?
I am 48. I'll be 49 this fall.
Oh, okay. When is your birthday?
September. You're November.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
I'm just older than you.
Just barely.
But just slightly younger. In
For same season. Does that mean you're a Scorpio too?
No, I'm a Libra.
First interesting. Okay, fun. And what do you do professionally?
I am an attorney, and I've been a professor of law for the past 7 years, and I'm about to start a new job as a college professor, teaching legal studies.
So exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a really significant transition, and the work that you had been doing was, listen, I thought it was fucking amazing. You worked on the Innocence Project.
Yeah, the Northern California Innocence Project. So it's a legal clinic. That means that law students at the school where I worked would come as a class, and we would be teaching them how to practice law by having them work on our cases. But our cases were innocence claims. So state prisoners who are in prison for long sentences, most of them are life terms, who claim that they're actually innocent, that they were not the person that committed the crime, or in some cases that the particular crime they were convicted of never actually happened. And so we spend our time investigating their claims, doing fact investigations, and then where we find evidence that they're really innocent, then we go to court to fight to get them out.
That's amazing. Yeah, and you've had some successes. I've seen you on TV. Super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, great work. I'm
Thank
so
you.
proud of the work that you do. It's really amazing and
Thank you.
Huge. And you've been at Santa Clara University for how long?
7.5 years.
Long time. Yeah, it's a great school.
Yeah.
So smart. I love that about you. You make me feel smarter just being around you. So, tell me a little bit about your family. So, listen, these are all, I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions I already know the answers to, but I think your story is just fascinating. So,
But you're not going to bust me if I tell a different version.
No, I will not. You'd be like, Your Honor, she's leading the witness, type of thing, but that's the
Objection
thing.
leading?
I know, right. But tell me a little bit about your mom.
So my mom, she was ahead of her time in some ways. She was born in Georgia, was this, really poor, grew up really poor. Like they ate her pet rabbit poor. You know, like one new pair of shoes a year poor.
Wow.
And she had an alcoholic dad. Her mom got married on her first unsupervised overnight, unsupervised date. So without a chaperone, she ran off and got married so that she could have sex, right?
Oh,
and
right.
She was 16. So my mom was born when she was 17. And
your mom was born.
My mom was born. My grandmother was 17, and they were dirt poor. And so my grandmother ended up divorcing the drunken husband after having 2 kids. And
what, a marriage at 16 didn't work
out? I know.
So
What,
weird.
to an alcoholic? And so actually, my grandpa, my mom's father, was in the 50s. Was sober in AA for a period of time, but he didn't make it. But he was sober for a period of time, and he died drunk.
Oh, he did.
So my grandmother remarried, had a couple more kids, and then had another alcoholic. So anyway, my mom was like, raised by her grandmother, basically, who was the age of a mom, and because her mom was always working, and she took off from Georgia like at 18, as soon as she could get away, and she was super, super smart. But never really got any education. She got her high school diploma and took off and was, as soon as she could, she was drinking. She discovered drugs, and she went off to New York to be an actress, and, had a baby with a married guy. That was my older sister. And then when my sister was a toddler, she met my dad. And in New York City, my dad was a New Yorker with Italian immigrant parents, kind of this, working class family. But he'd already graduated from college, which is, made him meet the criterion of our family that you had to be better than your parents. Anyway, my mom and my dad, by this time it's like the mid 60s, and they are, they're like at the late end of the beatniks, the early hippies, they're both really into, Jack Kerouac on the road, and they just take off and they go to California and they join the revolution, whatever.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, they lived in a little wood cabin in the Santa Cruz woods near Ben Lomond, and that's where I was born. I was born at home in a cabin in the woods
with a midwife
near Ben Lomond with midwife. Everybody was high, and they hung out the bloody bed sheet as my birth announcement. That's the baby is here, right? Full on. And I'm named for the Buddha that is yet to come, the coming incarnation
Maitreya
of the Buddha.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Maitreya. And I don't pronounce it Maitreya, but that's how the Buddhists pronounce it, Maitreya. My parents pronounced it Maitreya, so that's what I say.
Okay.
And it's the coming incarnation of the Buddha. And my mom used to say, "Won't they be surprised you're 1,000 years early and a girl?"
Oh, cute. Your mom had a Southern accent?
Yeah, Georgia.
She was a Georgia peach?
She was. She was more of a cracker, but it was it wasn't as strong when she got older. But it's class. Peach is kind of an upper class girl. Georgia Peach is like a lovely young lady with the gentleman collars, and my mother was dirt poor, hillbilly farmer. That where the hillbillies and the farmers met was her family line.
Okay.
And so, very poor, more
cracker?
Underclass. Cracker is like an insult for white poor people.
Okay, yeah, that's what I figured. Okay, interesting. I did not know that.
Yeah, there's all different interesting distinctions. But
we have lots of ways to separate ourselves, to define who's better than who and what people you belong with.
Yeah. So
what tribe are you from?
She kept the Georgia accent much more subdued, but she would occasionally, like, that was like her funny way of saying that. But she always had a little drawl.
Oh, that's so, I think that's so charming.
Yeah, I do too. When I drank, I had a drawl.
Yeah, you know what? My dad is from Kentucky, so occasionally I bust out with this. Yes.
Raylan Givens.
I know. So every once in a while, I bust out with this weird thing, and I don't know where it may come from Oprah, because she does that too, and I want to be like Oprah. I want to be Oprah when I grow up. I know, right? So, okay, that's
should
really...
we do the rest of this conversation?
No, we should not.
Accents? No, okay.
It would be fun.
Just lately, I've been really into Raylan Givens on Justified.
Oh, my goodness.
So I've been a lot of Kentucky, but I'll stop now.
Okay. Very entertaining. I appreciate it. Okay, so mom and dad get together. They have you. She gives you this name that you were going to...
She lays it on me because I'm going to be the Buddha of the future is going to come.
You're going to save the world.
Save the world with love.
With love.
So
well, listen, she was on the right track. Love will save the world, but... Yeah. I mean, that's a big job for a baby.
It's a big job for a baby. And, as soon as you take your first breath and need something, you've already failed. Because right? You fail at your life's purpose when you have needs if you are supposed to be the one that's coming
Interesting.
to save.
And so was that your predominant experience with your mother, that you had this reoccurring feeling that you failed?
Yeah. That's, this is stuff that we learn later, right?
We learn
look backward.
Later.
But that was my experience. My experience was that I was like the promised one. I was the promised child.
She had all these expectations of
all
you.
These expectations, real vague, but it was just going to be okay when I got there. And they had gotten married, and it was going to be okay. So, pretty much from the time I was an infant, there already were like major issues. She was already using. I don't think she was on heroin when she was pregnant with me, but she got into heroin while I was a baby. Or a toddler, at least. There's some photo evidence of that. And they broke up.
I'm sorry, what kind of photo evidence? Did you see maybe track marks or stuff?
Oh, no,
she
had track marks. All like, I don't remember being a baby, so I don't. The photo evidence is there's a proof sheet. My uncle was a photographer, and there's a black and white proof sheet, a contact sheet of all the little pictures on one of his rolls of film. That when he passed away, I was already sober, an adult, and I got his stuff at some point. And there's one contact sheet that has a photo of me in a diaper and a Snoopy T-shirt. So I'm a toddler, standing, reaching up and being handed a roach, a joint. On that same contact sheet, there's a shot of my sister on the potty. Her nightgown's like she's got her nightgown around her knees, and she's grinning up at the camera. So she's about 5.
Okay.
5 to 6. And so I can tell it's a contemporaneous shot because we would be the right ages. And then on that same roll, there's like a picture of my mom looking doped up, and there's a picture of an adult man's arm tied off with a needle in it. So it was like the whole composite.
He took a picture of that?
Apparently it looked artsy. When you're high, who even knows what you're thinking? And if you're getting high around little kids, I mean, who even knows? But
so, I'm sorry, she handed you, there's a picture of her handing you a roach. So
I don't know who's handing it to me, but one of them, yeah.
Somebody's handing you a roach. So you got high as a child?
I got high before I remember.
Jeez.
And I also, one of my favorite stories about me, again, things I don't remember, is that my dad had lost a tab of acid in the carpet somewhere, and he'd been crawling around for days looking for it. Meanwhile, I found it and ate it. And you
were tripping balls.
I was sort of tripping, and they didn't know what it was, and they started to take me to a doctor, and the doctor was like, eventually they figured out there was nothing really wrong with me.
Pupils were all dilated.
Yeah, I was just like high. So they just held on to me until I calmed down or whatever. But so that story was always told to me as if it was funny, but also like a sign of how irresponsible my father was. Like, it was never told.
Oh, the story was told by your mother.
Yeah, my mom would tell the story.
So it was his fault.
Right, it was his fault, and it was funny, both. Like, I could handle it because I'm so amazing. Maitreya, you are like the goddess. Of course you could take acid, but your stupid father caused it. Right. So they broke up when I was a baby, and they got divorced by the time I was like 3 or something. But that was like I have no recollection of them together. Okay. But so my dad kind of like went into the hippier direction, like living in communal houses and smoking a lot of dope and doing a lot of hallucinogens, but not really going any darker. He just kind of was trying to, he was very much a flower child type of guy, trying to...
So he's like in his 20s doing all this.
Yeah, I think he was 28 when I was born. My mom turned 30.
Okay, late 20s, early 30s.
Yeah, and like immature. So he'd already gone to college and like done the right thing and had his like engineering degree and then dropped out. So he spent 13 years doing this stuff, right? But when he went back, he was already ready to just go back into a regular job. So when I was 7, he ended up moving back to New York and went to work for the family paving company, which he worked at for the rest of his life.
Oh, wow.
And because he had an engineering degree so that he could work at the family paving company.
And he did what he said he would do.
He did what he said he would do. And my mom...
Super stable.
Yeah, my dad was super stable. And by the time I was 11, I lived with him, and that's how I survived. But my mom kind of kept going down. So instead of going to the more hippie side, she went to the darker side. And
listen, heroin is a dark path to take.
So she was doing heroin, and she was selling speed, and she was hooked up with this guy who was a Hell's Angel, and we lived with him on and off.
A Hell's Angel in the early 70s?
Yeah, mid to late 70s. Like he ended up being drummed out of the Hell's Angels for using needle drugs.
Oh, that's a no-no?
It was then. There's they had a line, you couldn't use needles. You could use speed, but you had to smoke it, you had to snort it, they didn't use needles. No needles, no heroin,
Oh.
Although I don't know, maybe you could smoke heroin. I have no idea. I just know that he was in trouble.
Time.
He broke various of the codes. But not the snitch code, because I learned about that from early childhood, that you don't snitch. Snitches get stitches. So, but anyway, yeah, so my mom just kind of went dark, and so that meant there was just a lot of moving around from place to place all around the Bay Area, mostly in San Francisco, different apartments, and we would just run up a tab at the corner store until it got to the point where they were hounding her to pay it, and we would move. Or, we got eviction notices at, every apartment. I don't think she ever went through an eviction, but, we just would take off,
So you went through, and listen, I know a lot of this about you, but you went through a process of always, losing all your stuff, no stability.
Yeah, I kept in the same schools, although actually we changed schools a lot, but everybody was changing schools a lot. In that time in San Francisco, they kept restructuring what grades went where.
Okay.
But
so everybody was in the same situation.
I was with the same group of kids. So I got tested into the gifted program or whatever it was, in the 2nd grade. Mm-hmm. And so I was always in whatever was the gifted class. And because they kept moving us around the city and the school district was doing that, I was with many of the same kids throughout elementary school. Mm. And I moved to New York after the 6th grade, but I was with a lot of the same kids from 1st grade through 6th grade. So that was a very helpful thing, and then teachers were a very, very helpful thing because I had scholastic aptitude. I was able to do school. That was kind of a saving thing because they saw that. Yeah. Those who were aware of anything funky going on at home just paid more attention to me. In the 70s, they didn't whip you out and bring you to CPS.
Okay.
Not in my experience.
You had to be really bad for
you had to show up with bruising all over your face or whatever.
Hospitalized.
That kind of thing. And there wasn't,
Okay, so you didn't get that and I know you escaped, certain kinds of abuse, but you were dealing with a mom that was on drugs, so you're a child of an a drug addict, alcoholic. She never got recovery, is that right?
No, and she was an alcoholic too. I mean, she was all of the icks.
Deep in the disease of addiction and alcoholism. And so that, I just can imagine what that would have done for you as a child, right? Having to be the responsible one or having to suck it up because mom was batshit crazy. And just not being able to, your needs were not put first. Yeah. Right. And do you feel that it was that dynamic that eventually led you to your own? I feel like we're jumping forward a little bit because you did end up going to your dad's. Yeah. And that kind of saved you. Yeah. But I almost feel like it seems like in every interview that I do, there's sort of a original harms.
Yeah. Period. I think it's all of the above, kind of. I definitely believe that there's a genetic predisposition. Mm-hmm. You just cannot miss it when you look at my family line. My mom's father and her grandfather were lifelong alcoholics. Yeah. It's really, genetic, it shows up. So I think I had the predisposition, and then the environmental stuff, very unstable and specifically, scary. Like, I had scary stuff. And I also had longing. I had a longing to be taken care of. And that longing was, like, left unattended. So there's, like,
unmet.
that. Right. So that's where you get that, like,
unmet
aching.
needs.
Right. Unmet needs, that,
longing.
like, aching, the hole, right? The God-shaped hole. So you get that combination. I had, like, whatever it was in me genetically to make me, react, weirdly to substances. I was exposed to substances very, very early. They always were high. Like, people were getting high, stoned, pot, like, all the time in those days in that scene. So that it was just always, they weren't always handing it to me, but nobody was ever saying no. And it was always in the air. My older sister was like 5 years older than I was. So she was a teenager when I was, 10 or whatever. So she was getting high all the time with her buddies. And so I just always had it and had access to it. So I never had that like, I've searched my brain in AA, like, people talk about, like, they always felt, out of sorts, uncomfortable in their own skin until they found whatever. I don't remember doing that, and I think that's because I already was on it.
You had always had it around.
When there was rarely alcohol around people in those days, people in our house, it wasn't really a drinking thing, but every once in a while, there was a party, there was whatever, and there'd be a big old jug of wine. Whenever there was alcohol, I got hold of it and drank it until I fell asleep.
Oh, wow.
At 6, at 7.
Yeah.
It's just what I did. And I never really was aware of any aching at that age. When I think of how I felt then, I remember being afraid. I remember being worried that my mom wasn't going to come home or she was going to die. She was always sick because she was dope sick. She was either sick or she was enraged because she was coming down or, needing
super
to use.
Irritable.
So she would, like, blip out with rage. Or she was missing. Like, she was out trying to cop, out in jail, out whatever, right?
So you would go, when you were little like that, she'd be missing for days at a time?
I think the longest was a couple of days that she would be missing. But what would happen is that she would put us with people and then she would disappear for longer. Like, if we were alone, she was back within 2 days. Yeah.
Oh, 2 days.
Well, I don't really remember. Like, when I was really little, I of course have no recollection. But my sister, by the time my sister was a teenager, she would be gone for sure for like a day or two.
Okay. And your sister was responsible for taking care of you?
Yeah, and my sister was responsible for taking care of me.
And your sister was high?
And my sister was, stoned, yeah. And
what was your relationship with your sister like?
It was, we were very tight when I was little. We were very, very tight. I kind of remember passing my sister developmentally in some way when I was around 8. She was... Intellectually? She sort of, yeah. She was not developmentally disabled in she was like able to read and write and sort of function fine, but there were definitely, like, I don't know what her diagnosis would actually be. She had a lot of physical problems, including diabetes, which ultimately
she did
contributed to her death.
But how old was she when she passed away?
She was 34, and the primary cause of her death was crack, but she had diabetes, and because of the crack, didn't take care of the diabetes, so she got ketoacidosis, which is like acidic blood. But so when she was younger, she like was fine about like sort of she was great about keeping the house clean. She was the only one in our house who like did laundry, did dishes, whatever. Okay. But she wasn't, like, she dropped out of high school in the 10th grade. She just wasn't good at that kind of stuff at school.
Not great at school.
And she was emotionally very stunted. So I think because of her emotional issues, she seemed to people who just met her like she might be slow. She wasn't actually slow intellectually. She wasn't super smart, but she wasn't. But she came off.
What a contrast, though, between the two of you, because you're like in the gifted programs, uber smart.
So part of that problem was, like, by the time I was 8, I remember passing her. I remember understanding things that she was not getting about other people. Like, she was not on it.
Got it.
Like, she couldn't pick up the cues. She trusted everybody.
I wonder if she was like on the autism spectrum
she
somewhere.
May have been, thinking about that.
Asperger's.
Something like that. She did have a lot of OCD stuff, so that is consistent. Anyway, she was like, she took care of she made sure that, like, I had clean underwear kind of thing, which my mom never did. And she made sure there was clean dishes. But that's about as much as she was really capable of sort of tracking. And so I was kind of feral. Like, I kind of was on my own. And, I was charming and cute and little. Like, I was a short little child. And, like, I'm not tall now, but as a kid, I was super small.
And you're freaking adorable. So
and, so I was like, so I tended to suck up to teachers and to suck up to other kids' parents. And, really, I mean,
So
it's
that
funny.
they would
It's
care
really-
for you?
Yeah, it's pretty manipulative, like, in a way.
Well,
I
that's
was
not
getting-
fair.
I
mean,
know, right?
Manipulation's kind of a negative term.
Right.
You were seeking to find ways to get your needs met.
Yeah, I was adaptive. So, like, I mean, I wouldn't say manipulative because I wasn't,
chameleon.
I didn't think in my head, like, I'm going to get these people, like, I'm going to fool them. But I knew what I needed to do to make people like me.
So that you can get your needs.
So that I could, so I could spend the night over, so they would feed me, so I could get a ride to the sleepaway camp, so I could, things like that. And
Wow.
so I already kind of had like a certain amount of street smarts, what I used to pride myself on. I had street smarts and I had school smarts, and I was just angry and afraid.
Yeah.
Neither of which I quite really knew at the time.
Right. Listen, we can only sometimes define our feelings until we have like something in contrast, to, like a contrast experience. So if your predominant feeling is fear, then only until you have the experience of feeling safe can you recognize what the feeling of fear is.
Yeah. And as a kid, my fear, as I saw it at all, was just for my mom. Like, I wasn't like, what happens to, I never consciously thought out loud, what happens to me if my mom dies? Like, I thought, oh my God, what if my mom dies? Like,
Yeah.
And I'm sure, obviously, it's deep rooted. I was worried about what would happen to us, but I was so focused on her. And I really felt like I had to keep her alive.
Yeah.
And I had to be there to keep her alive. So that kept me from moving away from her for several years, because my dad was trying from the time I was 3 to get me.
Oh, and you just wouldn't leave.
I know. So he lost the custody battle when I was 3, because moms always won,
no matter what,
in the 70s. And he didn't have some like great like history of having everything all set up, because he'd been like living around the country being a hippie.
He was high. Right.
So once he was sort of stabilized, he tried to convince me from about the age of 7 until 11, and that was 4 years. And I spent Christmases with him and summers with him.
Yeah.
In those years, and those were wonderful times, right? So I had this contrast of going and always having like nice people around and getting nice Christmas presents, and and then I would
peaceful home.
Yep. And every time I came home to California, we lived somewhere different. Every time,
God.
Without fail, we lived in a different apartment. I'm not sure about Christmas breaks, but every summer break, we always lived in a different apartment when I got back, and all my stuff would be gone, because that's how she moved. She just moved on. We would move into furnished, semi-furnished apartments with just old crap furniture, and we had old crap furniture anyway. She moved in hefty bags. She would move whatever clothes she would grab of ours. There weren't toys. There weren't books.
She'd grab everything.
No, it just was whatever was like swept into the trash bags. And one of the things that she would always say is, you don't, she would be screaming, you're like, don't keep this clean. You don't, because I was like such a wreck, so totally chaotic in my absence of any kind of organization or anything of my stuff, and it would just be everywhere. I remember I would always like move the pile from the floor to the bed when I got up in the morning, and then move it back onto the floor to get in bed at night, and that kind of behavior. And so the room was just, I always shared a room with my sister wherever we lived, and it would just be like total chaos. And then my sister would carve out this one little neat place for herself around her bed that would be pinned neat.
Oh, so you guys are like polar opposites.
Right. And that's how she kept herself
Interesting.
okay. So my mom would always say, well, maybe if you keep this place neat, we won't have to move again. That was her story. So I got this message that
it's your fault.
It's my fault, and something I have to do that I can't do will keep us safe. So that's the story, man.
It's your responsibility and your fault. And by the way, you will never be able to reach that goal. So there's that reoccurring thing of failing.
Yeah. So that's the story. So I don't know that anything made me be an alcoholic, but I can say that like I had all those seedlings.
Yeah.
And then when I moved to my dad at like almost 12, all of a sudden it was like I had been in this loud, chaotic, like in a rave where there was just flashing lights and music and things moving around and like craziness and insanity that was like my attention was going in 360 degrees. And then I went into like a silent, empty, sober, like, I mean, he wasn't sober, but he had a beer like every day, one beer or if that, but like just into this apartment with this dad, with my own bedroom, with
that must have been like the Twilight Zone.
School shopping. And at first, there's all the wonderfulness of school shopping and things that I always wanted. And my dad was like, really loved me and was really glad I was there, but he didn't really know how to he had no awareness of like, no one did. in those days about like, what do you do with this child that's basically just been traumatized for 11 years? Just like profound extended trauma. So there was no therapy. Right. There was no nothing. There was just like, your mother's a crazy drug addict.
And now you're here.
And it's going to be okay, right? So just get good grades and everything will be okay.
Yeah.
And he did a lot of really important like structural things. He got me, he forced me to do gymnastics. He wanted me to do a sport. And so I was in gymnastics, and he went and behind the scenes got the coach of the, junior high team to let me on, even though I wasn't any good on the JV team, just so I would have practice every day, which ended up becoming a huge thing for me. For the first several years I lived in New York, I got really into gymnastics and got much better and got in shape and had a team, had friends.
Yeah.
So that is like one of those things that was like, there's a lifesaver that my dad orchestrated just because he knew I needed to be in shape and I needed to have an activity that was positive.
Okay.
He fed me dinner. He made me lunch every night. He cooked dinner. He made me wash dishes.
He was consistent.
No one ever made me wash dishes because my sister did it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, he made me vacuum every weekend, and I hated vacuuming. And just sort of, there was all these routines, some of which were awesome, some of which I hated, but they were put into place. But it still was just this, like, it was
structure.
Just like, it was structure, and it was, like,
consistent.
And I was immediately, like, I had to be the chaos because I didn't, like, I was, like, in the middle of this whirlwind, and all of a sudden, so that's where I feel like if I was gonna trace like where the thirstiness came from, it was all of a sudden, because I was always taking something in California. Like all right, so my favorite story, I've got to have my chance to tell this story, is that I met my best friend, who's still my best friend now, Mari, when we were in the 6th grade. She was walking up and down by the benches at lunch recess, asking everybody, do you get high? Do you get high? Like, do you smoke weed? Do you smoke weed? Do you smoke weed? It's probably, do you smoke grass? Because it was 1979. But whatever. She was saying, do you smoke weed? And everybody was like, no. And she gets to me. She's like, do you smoke weed? And I said, yeah. And she's like, you want to get high? And I was like, yeah. And she goes, okay, here's my phone number. Call me and we'll come over after school. We'll get high. So I call her after school.
Best friends for life.
Turns out she lives 5 blocks away from me.
Wow.
So I walk over to her house, and she has stolen some of her mom's pot and her little pipe, and we sneak down her back stairs towards, like, her garage is on a hill, so there's, like, these stone stairs, and we're down on these stone stairs. We get stoned, and we totally bond. And, she was still 10, I was 11, and that was 38 years ago.
Wow.
And we're still best friends. She also took me to my first AA meeting 8 years before I got sober. So she's got 28 years now.
Holy shit.
Yeah. So, but that girl, that's how I made my best friend for life, right? So that's sort of who I was, right? At core was this kid that always got high, always looked for the way out, always skipped school, always stole, always, So when I got to New York and all of a sudden it was like quiet and safe, there was like something missing. These things were taken care of and that was fine, but there was something missing that I was used to having, and I was like, that's when I got agitated. I have journals from
You were
this.
like medicated.
Yeah, I was medicated from birth, and I have some journals going back as early as that first year of living with my dad, and I hated everyone. I had mean things to say about everyone. I was calling everybody names. I was cursing all the time in my journals. Lots of, fucking asshole, and just calling people the C word, and all the teachers, the girls that were mean to me in junior high, like, just like really, really angry. And you start to see the descriptions of being thirsty and like sneaking alcohol from people's parents' bars and, finding the pot because there were always people around who got high. So that's like where it starts as like me, myself, intentionally searching it out in like a really on purpose way. The 3 years I lived in that first town with my dad, I got to the point where I drank, there was this wine called Jacobazzi, and it was a screw cap. It was $3.99 for the liter bottle or whatever.
A liter.
Yeah. And each of us, of the like about 3 or 4 girls that would always be hanging out together, the drinking age was 18 at the time. So boys would be able to buy us. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
It changed to 19 while I was there, and then it changed to 21 before I was 18. But the boys would be able to, like, there were guys that were seniors that could get us alcohol. So we would each get our own bottle of wine.
Oh my God.
Each of the 2 weekend nights. And I would drink a bottle of wine Friday night and a bottle of wine Saturday night by myself. And I was 5'3", 110 pounds.
Wow.
Every night.
Yeah.
Of the 2 nights.
Yes.
So that is like thirsty.
Yes.
And I started to have, like, I had an alcohol poisoning incident with hospitalization at 14. And then my dad got married to this woman who had kids my age, and we moved to a different town, and I went into a blackout at their wedding reception, which had an open bar. Nobody was watching the kids. I got so drunk I went into a blackout, and then I passed out, and I was screaming, "I hate you for marrying this bitch,"
Perfect.
This whole thing.
Great way to start.
So, and then those years, like the last 3 years of high school, I was in this new town, and I had an opportunity to reinvent myself, and I had a stepmother who was watching like an eagle and who hated me, and who was always like pointing her finger and going, "You're an alcoholic like your mother, and you're a slut, and you're this, that." So I had to learn how to put it underground and hide it. Because my dad was always just at work, or like he was oblivious.
Okay.
And as long as I got good grades, it was all good, right? So then I had to learn the like dishonesty part. It's like I had to put the pieces together bit by bit. So I had to learn how to live the double life.
You learned to be sneaky.
Learned how to be sneaky, learned how to lie about where I was. And then I went to college and drank like I wanted to. Went to a college like.
But you know what amazes me is that you were able to become a lawyer.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's that whole like
crazy.
It kept me going for a long time.
Was law school difficult for you?
Law school sucked. I drank really hard in college, and had it almost drummed me out. Like I almost failed out my first year, but I figured out what I had to do to balance it. I had not crossed over that line where I could still manage when I drank. I couldn't not drink. But I could like after a year I could not drink when it was time to study for a test. I could miss one night in order to write a paper. Like I was, I had that much control over it, and so I was. You
were able to rein it in enough to pass all your classes.
Yeah, and to do well, and I needed to do well to go to law school, so I had to really like be obsessed with my grades to make up for a very bad first year. Okay. So I did great for 3 years, so that I could graduate pretty damn good, right? Yeah. And I test well, so that's how I got into law school.
Where did you go to? Where did you do your undergrad?
At the University of Georgia.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
And then you went to law school?
At Berkeley.
At Berkeley, okay. Berkeley's a first year of law school?
It is. It's like, I'm a good test taker. It's one of my, like my
Listen, let's not pretend you're not brilliant.
I'm not saying I'm not brilliant. I think I'm smart. But like, there's lots of kinds of smart. One of the
When your skill sets? Okay.
One of my skill sets is standardized tests.
Okay.
So like, we know. Those of us who look at things like studies know that there are certain biases in standardized tests, and for whatever reason, I nail them.
You're just good at it.
So I really do well.
Can you teach my son?
Knocking wood there. It's been really good for me. Yeah. My ability to take standardized tests right from like second grade
SATs
on.
And all that?
Right? The second grade, it got me into the gifted program.
Did you crush the...
I didn't even... Like the SATs, I did really well. So I got a full scholarship to college. I crushed the LSAT. Like I was in the 99.6 percentile or whatever.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
That's
how I got into Berkeley, even though my grades were like a 3.6 or something. They weren't like, you can't go to Berkeley below 4.0 now.
And when you had to pass the bar, you passed it the first time?
I passed it the first time, which is a miracle. So how I got through law school thing is like, I couldn't drink like I did in college. I had started to recognize, okay, so I visited Mari when she was almost a year sober. She, at this point, was living in Dallas. I was in college in Georgia. Okay. So I went to visit her for Christmas break of my senior year of college. Mm-hmm. And she was like her birthday is February 6th, her sobriety date. So, she was like 10 months sober. And she was 21. Okay. And she was hanging out with all these other young alcoholics, some of whom had 2, 3, 4 years because they'd been sent away to rehab as teens, right? Yeah. So there was like this whole gang in Dallas. They were hipsters. They were all waiting tables.
They were all connected. They had community.
They were super into working the steps together, and they like watched movies together all night and drank, coffee and ate ice cream and just had so much fun. Mm-hmm. And they took me to one meeting with them while I was there because that's what they were doing. And so that one meeting did that thing. It ruined my drinking. It was 8 years before I got sober. But I went to that one meeting and I was looking around and I was like these people are all happy. Yeah. And they're like happy, joyous, and free. And they're my age and they don't drink. But they have they have at least as much fun as we have. How is this?
And they are able to be real and bond over their pain and be honest. But
I didn't know that part. I did not know that part yet. Because I was there for a week, right? And I saw them having fun. Okay. I saw them having fun without drinking and getting high. And I couldn't believe it. But I went back to college for my last 6 months and I was like, I better make sure I don't have a problem because my mom has a problem. And I said, okay, I'm gonna just go the last quarter without drinking, or so it's gonna be 6 months now that I have from January to June. I won't drink. I'll just make sure. I didn't say this out loud to anybody. I'll just make sure I don't have a problem with alcohol. So I went that 6 months, except I really went 5.5 months because I figured that was good enough. And I took the week off for spring break because, I mean, come on, who's not going to drink their senior year spring break? And
Don't be stupid.
Right, duh. And then, like, I also didn't count smoking dope or eating mushrooms because that wasn't alcohol. Therefore, for myself, I was relatively convinced that I was okay.
Yeah.
That was my first one of those things, right? And that was 8 years before I got sober.
8 years. 8 years.
8 years. The last 2 years of my drinking, I did it much more full on, like it says in More About Alcoholism. Like really shifting this for that, switching this for that.
Yeah.
No pot, but I drank shots. No shots, but I smoked pot. And I did that whole thing until
the mushrooms.
Until it like just crashed and burned at the end. So
so
that whole 8 years, it was like the seed got planted with one meeting that wasn't for me, that I never went with an intention of seeing something I wanted.
Yeah,
I literally had no idea. But that's like the miracle of it is, right? Mm-hmm. And then so the way I got through law school was what I call marijuana maintenance. Mm-hmm. Like, again, not on not like I thought this through in a conscious way, because that would have required me being that conscious of my drinking. It was more like somehow I recognized that I wasn't going to fit in if I was binge drinking all the time like I did in college. It wasn't what people did, but people did have a glass of wine way more often. Like there was like wine at our school events because everybody was 21.
Wine is classy.
Right. And so there would be beer and wine at the school, at the like law journal celebrations or whatever. So I was like, okay, but I can't really drink at these things.
Can't get shitty.
And I can't really drink if I can't get shitty. So I didn't really drink very often in law school, but I got high all the time. Mm-hmm. I found the guys that got high. Mm-hmm. And I just hung out with them behind the building, got high, and then just had maybe...
Other law students?
Other law students. Okay. And then I would have like a beer here and there. Mm-hmm. And then from time to time I would have that need. And I would say, I'm going out and getting fucked up. And I would go out and get fucked up. Like, and to me, that was okay.
Binge drinking?
Yeah, because that was planned. That wasn't a problem. That was like... It was time to go get drunk, right?
Yeah, a lot of people don't see binge drinking as alcoholism.
Yeah, and and I didn't, and that kept me going for a while. But I remember at some point, like in the middle of law school, I was like, had one of those nights, had driven home, up in the hills of Berkeley, crazy road, and I was in my toilet puking, and I remember just being like, I didn't really think I would do this I never thought I would throw up anymore. Yeah. Like, this is what in college, I threw up all the time from drinking. Because I just always drank until I puked.
Me too.
So it's just what I did, right?
I know.
It would be great, because I'd be like, oh, good, I can change and go back out. Because it's not emptying out, right? But, so this was weird. I had this moment, right? Yeah. And then right before I got sober, like a couple months before I got sober, I was at a party, and I'd been like drinking, getting high, like all evening, just crazy, like party hopping, and like drove my friend, to this party, walk in, halfway up the guy's front steps into his apartment, which were carpeted with white carpet. Ugh. I start puking red wine.
Listen, that's their fault for having red carpet.
But I'm like puking red wine. I somehow get off those stairs and back into the apartment, where I walk straight through to the back door, to the back wooden stairs, and start puking again. Mm-hmm. So I never was even in the party. I just walked through it from one vomit to the next. He was one of my first amends, but I was out there puking, right? And I was just like...
Did you have to pay for their carpet?
He didn't make me. I offered. I offered to pay to clean it. He was super nice. But yeah, so that was like one of... I don't remember. It wasn't the last one, but it's like, I remember like there I was, like 28, like puking again in somebody's house. Like, what am I doing? Like, no one else is doing this anymore. Like,
so is that when you recognized it was a problem? Or that you might be an alcoholic?
I had already been kind of doing that thing for a couple of years.
Asking that. Yeah, a couple of years. There seems to be a reoccurring trend that once you start, it takes like 2 years to grapple with that idea, am I an alcoholic? It takes about 2 years for it to sink in.
Yeah, and I think that I see a lot of people do it in the rooms, right?
Sure.
So they're going in and out. I wasn't.
For 2 years.
Part of it was another best friend who was just about to become my roommate got sober. Like right as we were moving in together, and I was like, oh, what the hell? Like, and I remember saying, like, you don't even drink as much as I do, what the fuck?
Right.
And I'm not going to stop smoking pot in our apartment just because you're in AA, and but that was there was this person over in the corner that was like getting cleaned up, and like getting her face was pinking up, and she was getting boyfriends.
We get healthy.
And going out and having a good time.
We start glowing.
Yeah, and so we were already like both really into tarot cards and like reading,
searching for answers.
Searching, like the self-help section, the spiritual, right? Like all reading Sherry Huber and all that stuff. And
what did Sherry Huber write?
Sherry Huber's a Zen practitioner. I think she's from like the Mountain View Zen Center, and she writes these books that are like they look like
Handwritten?
Like not script, but like printing. They look like handwritten print.
Oh.
And they're written like that to be read slowly with the heart rather than quickly with the eyes.
Nice.
And there's one that's called the Fear Book. There's one that's called There's Nothing Wrong with You.
Oh.
There's one that's called That Which You Seek Is What Is Causing You to Seek.
Ooh,
Oh, they're so
that
wonderful.
title is deep.
Oh, they're Zen, right? So they're so good. And I really liked American Zen writers like Joko Beck, who wrote something called Nothing Special and Everyday Zen. Just like not a lot of language around Buddhism, not a lot of like, I don't really care to know necessarily the lineage and the precepts. I mean, I think it's interesting to learn about religions in general, but what I really want to know is like, what do you do for the relief?
The practical application.
What do you do? Right. And
coping skills is really what you're talking about.
how do we like heal, and then how do we grow? Right.
Yeah.
And now I know those are
and
the
how do we
questions.
cope with day-to-day practical issues?
Yeah. So I was like trying to do that while I was still drinking, of course, as a pretty common part of the stories that I've heard too. Right. And so I was like, turned out I lived right around the corner from the Zen Center. So they had like a 5:40 in the morning sitting meditation sessions that was open for the public just to walk in. So I started to do that sometimes. And, I was meditating. I found this church in San Francisco that, because I lived in the city still, at the San Francisco Weekly is like one of the free weeklies at the time. It had a cover story one week called One Weird Church. And it was all about like the architecture of this building and the art and all the coincidences and all the people involved and how they'd come together to make this really cool Episcopal church in Potrero Hill, which was at the time kind of an industrial and residential neighborhood that wasn't particularly Episcopalian or whatever. It was a cool article, and I was like, well, maybe that's a weird enough church for me, because I didn't really have any kind of religious upbringing. Both parents had family that were, my dad had Roman Catholic, my mom had Southern Baptist. Parents had both rejected those religions as being too constrictive and repressive, and they wanted to be free, and they wanted the kids to be free.
They wanted the pendulum swung the other way.
Right. And so they were like not anti-God, they were very like God is love,
Okay.
but they were not into organized religion. I'd only ever been to church with grandparents, and I had liked it as a little kid and been bored as an older kid, right? And so
sounds pretty typical.
But I had this thought of like, as I was in these last couple of years of struggle with the drinking and like it started to show up as sex acting out. Like I'd always had sex acting out even as a teenager, but really bad, like just, strangers and the worst thing of all is it always was like, while I hadn't yet had a drink, that I would decide to go do that. So it really made me feel like I was a real scumbag. It wasn't just like, oh, it happens to me. It was like, why do I like decide to go hunt someone down and like if I can't get you, I'll have you kind of. It's just gross, right?
Were you attracted to men and women at that time as well? Because I know that's part of your...
Yeah, I figured that out. Like I got through college without ever figuring out I was bisexual. It turns out like I've always been bisexual, but I didn't know it because when I was 11, I confessed to Mari on some sleepover at her house. I was like, I think I'm gay. I'm scared. I don't want to tell you because you won't like me. And she's like, you're not gay. Don't worry. She's like, lots of kids our age get crushes on their friends and on people of the same sex. You'll outgrow it. Don't worry.
Such sage wisdom.
We were both so wise, right? We were both so wise.
You were older than her, right? You were a year older than her.
No, I'm only 3 months older than her, but she's just super young for our class.
Oh,
right?
Got it.
I'm young for our class. She's super young for our class.
Okay.
So I'm 3 months to the day older than her, actually.
But you're getting all this sage advice.
Yeah, this is my sage advice from my tiny little friend, and she's even tinier than I was. We tried to be cholas because we went to school in the Mission, and they totally busted us, and just like the Latina girls were just making fun of us, and they called me La Mouse and her La Munchkin. Those are our chola names.
Okay.
We're lucky.
Did you do the eyebrows and stuff?
Yes. Well, I didn't, but
awesome.
Mari did the eyebrows. We had the Sir Jack jackets and the Dickies pants and the Chinese slippers and the eyeliner, thick black eyeliner.
Yeah.
Yeah, baby blue eyeshadow.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty bad.
Listen, you get in where you fit in. And...
I moved away after the 6th grade, or I would have had my ass kicked. They just didn't kick our asses because we were literally little kids. Like they just
they thought it was cute.
They laughed. They thought we were ridiculous.
Yeah, ridiculous.
So anyway, so Mari was like, "Oh, you'll outgrow it," And so I remember we kept in touch all the years that I lived away. I only lived in the same city with her that first year for a year of our friendship. So we would write letters or whatever, and we would send audio tapes. And I remember her saying, so what about that thing? Like, do you think you like girls? And I remember like, oh, no, I have a crush on Paul. I have a boyfriend. Paul is my boyfriend. Make that up. But, whatever. And so I was like, just let go of that. I was in denial of the girl half, but I always had the legitimate boy half. And so I began to believe, well, first of all, nobody in those days believed bisexuality existed. There are still people who don't believe it exists, right?
That's so hilarious.
So they're like, you're just afraid to admit you're gay or whatever, right? So I was like, well, I'm definitely not gay because I love boys. And the more I get of them, the more I want, So that's not true. But as I got older, I didn't really in high school have any like active crushes on girls that I knew. But I did have fantasies about women, like unknown women, not people I knew.
Just the idea.
But the idea of a woman. And then in college, I had a couple of, not so much crushes like romantic, but like sexual attractions to a few girls I did know. Mm-hmm. And
never acted out?
Never acted on it. And a lot of fantasy. And I remember once being super high in my sorority house, and this girl who I was pretty sure was actually a lesbian, she had some gaydar, right? I didn't know what that was, but... She had some gaydar now. I still know her thanks to Facebook, and she's like real Christian and married with 4 kids, and maybe not. But she was hot.
She prayed the gay away.
I don't know if she prayed the gay away. She's never admitted having any. But we were in the shower. We went into a shower stall together and took a shower together, really loaded. Like, I was so stoned. And all I wanted to do was touch her. I mean, I totally remember this shower. I did not touch her. I didn't, I kept my eyes closed because I was like, if I even look at her, it's just not going to be okay.
It's going to be over.
So I was like, but this girl and I, we used to nap together. Like, we used to snuggle. We never so much as...
Super intimate.
There was no stroking. There was no kissing. There was no actual sexual touch. But we used to, like...
Super intimate.
Spoon. But it was always, like, hungover or drunk, right? That we would just, like, lie around together. So... That's weird, I find. It turns out that doesn't so much happen. Although maybe just women are intimate. I don't know. And then I lived in Italy for a summer of college, like studying abroad, and the family that I lived with had a 26-year-old daughter who was so effing gorgeous, and I actively fantasized about her, like the whole summer. I just wanted to kiss her, which I didn't, because she let me know that there had been a prior foreign exchange student who was a lesbian, and they were really good friends, and she hit on her, and she had to say no. So I think she could tell I had those thoughts, even though I never said a word.
Man, you must have been looking at her with those dreamy eyes. She's like, just so you know, that ain't
like the cartoon hearts in the eyeballs.
Yeah, exactly.
Pepe Le Pew. So, anyhow,
Pepe Le Pew was a total rapist, by the way.
He was totally fucker. But so anyway, so like I had all that, never knew it.
Okay.
It's just like alcoholism, like denial. Like you can keep it totally aside. It can be right there,
and you cannot see it.
And it's not even like once you know about it, it's not like you'd forgotten it or anything. You just like closed it off. I just kept closing it off. Like,
oh nope.
And I was like, straight girls have fantasies about women. That's just part of what straight girls do.
You explained it away.
Right. And for all I know, a lot of straight girls do have fantasies about women. I just happen to not be straight. But I didn't know that. Because I was like, I like boys. I love men. I love having sex with them. Obviously, I'm not gay.
Okay.
And then I ended up dating somebody, my senior year, the very end of my senior year. And then I graduated from college. And I was like in love, Sean. And
were you already sober?
No.
Okay, not
I got sober at 28.
Okay.
So I was 21.
Got it. Okay.
Got engaged to him, lived with him, getting ready to move back out to California to go to law school, and we're gonna like have this wedding and everything. And I'm like, my dad's planning this wedding up in New York. We're down in Atlanta. I'm waiting tables, and I just flipped out. I was like, I cannot get married. I cannot get married to Sean. I cannot get married now. I don't even know who I am. I think I like girls. I like had this friend. She was a roommate of one of my coworkers, and she was so obviously just busting to come out. Like she was like a senior in college, and she was just like confronting this question, and she is a lesbian, and she just wasn't sure yet and was afraid. And we started talking. We never hooked up, but we basically came out together. Like I came out as, I think I'm bisexual. Well, I didn't even say that because I still didn't believe in it. I just came out.
You thought you were gay.
I thought I must be gay. I thought I must have been lying to myself all this time. So I go out to California getting ready to start law school, and I'm like, I'm gay. So I'm like, find the gay bar, go to the gay bar, pick up a girl. I pick up a girl, I take her home, I have sex with her. I'm like, I'm gay now. I'm like, didn't really like it. I was like, fuck, gotta do that again, right? Like, but
I probably didn't do it right.
I definitely did not do it right.
I'm an amateur.
And I felt super weird, and she kept calling me baby, and I was like, that's not right. Don't call me baby. That's weird. I don't want some woman calling me baby and having sex with me. So I started law school that fall. That was in the summer. So I started law school that fall and like got my first girlfriend and like, you know, like, and then I was like, oh, okay, this is what it is. So but I started law school as an out, like, I was telling everybody I was a lesbian. My girlfriend was like, you're bisexual. I was like, no, I'm not. She's like, duh, you've always dated men. You like men.
You like
you're
dick.
Bisexual.
You're bisexual.
Right. And but yeah, so then it's like been since about age 22 that I've just been openly bisexual. As soon as I figured it out that it really is a thing.
That's a thing.
I've just been openly bisexual.
Got it. Okay.
And I'm lucky because, you know, I'm from people that are like crazy enough that
that's
like
cool.
that they're just right. There just never was that particular issue. Like family didn't react or anything.
Okay. So let's fast forward. So you start your sobriety journey. So the seed was planted, and then you fast forward to sobriety. And then why did you decide to, you know, participate in AA?
So I had the roommate that was going for a year and a half and was like, you know, things were going well for her. Things were going really poorly for me.
Okay.
The sexual acting out was getting worse and worse. I found that church, started going to that church, was having a spiritual experience, was meditating. And I had this I took this business trip. I don't want to get into it, but I just had some sexual escapades that were like at a new low of humiliation for myself.
Oh, that's the
incomprehensible.
Singapore.
Yeah, the pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. PID.
Yeah.
So and I got like my roommate Liz, who was sober, picked me up in my car at the airport when I landed from that trip, and I was just like,
I need to go there.
And so that was November, and I started praying, November 96. So I started praying. I kept going to the church. I had joined the church in October, praying, and I started saying, if there is really a God, if that's an actual thing, if there is a God, and you will show me what to do, I swear I will try to do it. Please help me. I still didn't know.
Please help me.
I didn't know it was alcohol. I thought maybe it was sex. I just didn't know. But I had done enough experimenting in those 2 years to know that any of the pieces, pot led to the trouble. Drinking led to the trouble. Sex led to the trouble. And they all led to each other. So the only way it was going to work is for me to find some way to not do any of it, which I was terrified to try.
Yeah.
And so I had been in therapy like a couple of years already. And so I had actually been to 1 or 2 meetings with Liz in those couple of years, but just with her, not for myself. Like in my mind, I wasn't going to go to a meeting. I was going to hang out with Liz.
You weren't applying it to your own life.
Right. I wasn't. And I was, you know, and I thought that
those poor people.
I thought they were nice, but like a little weird and whatever. I just wasn't paying attention. I was not at all paying attention to what was being said.
Right.
And so then I like asked her to take me to a meeting in January, like to go to a meeting.
For you.
Yeah. And she had been doing the attraction rather than promotion thing. She had never, ever tried to sell it to me.
Right.
And so she took me and I started to go. And when the first time I went, like for myself, I raised my hand and announced myself as a newcomer. Because I had been to a couple, you know, because I had watched Liz and I knew Mari, I knew what the deal was, and I wasn't convinced that I was an alcoholic, and I was actually scared I wasn't, because I was really hoping AA would work for me.
You were looking for an answer
or
really solution to your
help.
problem.
And so the great thing about that is that when I started AA, I immediately did the deal. I asked someone to sponsor me. Now, yeah, she was the hot lesbian secretary of the Saturday night Hip Slick and Cool meeting, so I was a little crooked, but she took me through my first 5th step right away. And then I got myself like the middle-aged married woman, which is, you know, was the right thing. And she wasn't a mom, no kids, but for 5 years she was my sponsor, and she was my stable sponsor.
Okay.
And my only stable sponsor till you, actually. There was like a bunch in between, but not like she stayed for 5 years, and we've worked together for 4, and that's like, and you're stuck with me for life now. So
for sure.
But
I will hunt you down.
So like I really
like you.
So my experience in the rooms is that I literally just came in and immediately did it. Like I had been through the middle of my 9th step by 4, 5, 6 months, somewhere in there, and it worked. Like I had a first step. It took a little while to actually did it. I worked one, but
did
like
it the same way.
It landed on me after the first 5th step. Like it landed that I was terrified I was just gonna drink again, and that suddenly became like like I might not be able to stop myself from drinking. And I remember when people would say, you know, you don't ever have to drink again if you don't want to. And I'd be like, that is not comforting. I always want to when I drink. That's why I drink. How do you stop me from wanting to? That's what I need to know.
That's the problem.
Right? It's not about, you know, if I don't want to, how do you make me not want to? Right?
Yeah.
And so
that's a better way to put it,
I remember having that, like, like, oh my God, I'll drink even if I don't want to. I literally cannot stop myself from drinking.
Oh,
I
yeah.
will not be able to stop myself. No human power. And it like hit me in a meeting, thank God. It was like, I was like crying, and I wasn't sharing. I was just sitting there crying, and I realized it, and I talked to my sponsor, and she was like, yeah, so you think you might be powerless over alcohol? And I'm like, I am powerless over alcohol.
Yeah.
And that did it. Like, I haven't, thank you God, I have not looked back. And and I was 20 years in January. And I've had like lots of ups and downs in terms of my dedication and really active working of the steps. Mm-hmm. But the great thing about that is that I can look back and I can see that pattern of every time I've been really, really into the program, like really working it.
Yeah.
Ideally, also a lot of meetings. But more importantly than the meetings
is doing the steps.
The steps are the recovery.
Is the recovery.
The meetings are both a way to be in community and have fellowship, but also to meet newcomers.
Yeah.
That's where you find newcomers, and that's great because you need them to work your steps. But it's really, as far as like me being happy, joyous, and free, that is about actively working the steps and working them different ways and working them, you know, with new people and around different stuff. When we started working together, it was all about relationships, and I was bottomed out on not being able to sustain and have a loving sexual relationship that was healthy.
And you were also struggling with your kids too, so you have two kids.
Yep, I have two kids.
You were a single parent.
Single at the time with my two kids. I'd had each kid in a different relationship. The second one with that same guy from the college boyfriend.
So Sean has
been
a reoccurring, and now you guys are married.
Yes, Sean is my soulmate. We are in a platonic marriage that has been platonic since we got married.
But supportive, loving, and you guys are parenting together,
and it's
amazing.
You
guys support each other. So it's very unusual and it's not mainstream or whatever.
Right, it's a non-traditional marriage, which I love to say. Like I had a lesbian marriage, which is how I got my daughter. And now I have a non-traditional marriage with my husband, and that's how I got my son. Actually, we weren't married when we had our son.
Yeah.
But we got married after we'd already broken up as a couple, and a couple of years ago we did that for practical reasons, and long story about why we needed to live in the same apartment, and why we needed to be married to live in the same apartment. And now we're about to move to a house. We always have our own bedrooms, but we are committed. I am not tongue-in-cheek when I say he's my soulmate. Like, I'm pretty sure he's my soulmate.
I know.
And
he's been in your life for a very long time.
Since I was 21, and I'm 48, right?
Yeah.
So more than half. And also, you know, all my close family have passed away in my adult life. My sister died when I had 9 months of sobriety.
Brutal.
My mom died when I was pregnant with my daughter. So
you were pregnant with her? You were pregnant with Evie when your mother died?
Yeah, and that was 15 years ago.
What? Can you tell me the quick story? I mean,
she had ovarian cancer, but she died with a crack pipe physically in her hand. So I think she just used herself to death because she was going to die. She was on chemo, but she was probably going to die.
You think she was stage 4? Ovarian?
I think she was stage 3 at the time, but when she got diagnosed, but she also was homeless and still using, and she was using crack. So they called it as ovarian cancer in the hospital, but she actually was out, couch. Okay. She was out getting high when she passed out, lost consciousness, and the two people she was with brought her to the emergency room and ran off. So she lost consciousness from whatever the drugs were.
Okay.
And they called me to talk to me about organ donation. I was like, don't touch her organs. Do not touch that woman's organs unless you want to study them for science. How she lived to be 63, despite the way she lived her entire life. You might want to study them, but don't put them in anyone else's body if you want them to live.
Good God. I know. Good for you.
But yeah, so I got to the reason I got my uncle's contact sheets with those photos is my, at the time, wife, Jules, and I, and my pregnant belly got to, that was June, and Evie was born 4 months later. So I was 5 months pregnant, 5-6 months pregnant. And we drove up, my uncle flew out from Georgia, my mom's younger brother, and we drove up to Arcata where she had died and collected her ashes. And then she had been carrying around my sister's ashes for the 5 years since she died.
Oh, so your sister died before your mother.
Yeah, my sister died when I had 9 months.
Your mother must have been devastated.
She was. Her last several years were just like a swirling vortex.
I didn't realize. For some reason, in my mind, I always thought your mother went first.
Mm-mm.
Oh, no parent should outlive their child.
Yeah, so it actually, the order from my perspective was my sister, my father, my mother. So it was really brutal that my mom outlived everybody.
And you also lost your uncle, too.
Yeah, I lost my
And your grandmother.
And my grandmother and my, and my great-grandmother. She died when Evie was a baby.
Yeah. That's not as unusual.
No, that's true, but I had her my whole life until I was 35. So anyway, you have a lot of loss. I do. The sobriety story, I always joke that, when I first got into the meetings and I would hear people share, there were like two stories I would hear. There was like the A sobriety and the B sobriety. The A sobriety was like, my life was a wreck and I couldn't stop drinking and I came into the rooms and like did the steps and I got all the cash and prizes and fell in love and got married and had wonderful kids, have the career of my dreams and I'm rich and I have a vacation home. And, then the B story was like, I was a wreck and I couldn't stop drinking and I came to AA and I got sober, I worked the steps and then, everybody died and I went bankrupt and I got married and divorced and my husband cheated.
And stayed sober through it all.
I stayed sober and this happened and I stayed sober and then I got breast cancer and I stayed sober and then I walked through it sober and now I'm here to tell you can walk through anything sober. And I would be sitting there and as a newcomer I'd be like, I'll take the A story. That's the one I want. I hear that there's these two, but I'll take that one.
Yeah.
And, for a long time I was like, I was really pissed because I didn't seem to be getting the A story. Like, I got the wife, but then she left me when I was like, when we had a 12-month-old baby. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know if I was going to end up on the street with this baby because we lived in her flat. And none of that happened, but I was in fear.
You were in fear.
Right? And, I got fired the only time I got fired when I was 15 once for being completely incompetent as a cashier. But, as an adult, my only grown-up job, my only law job that I ever got fired from was in sobriety.
That's hilarious.
And I totally deserved it. And, so I got fired and was in terrible financial circumstances, really making a wreck of relationships. My wife left me. I'm an only, single mother of this baby all of a sudden. Turns out we co-parented through all the years, but I didn't know that was coming. And so freaked out. I felt like such a failure, Then I come around and see Sean again and we're fall in love again. Oh my God, well maybe this is why it all happened that way. And I get together with Sean and immediately sort of incidentally get pregnant, and then I realized that even though he's sober, nothing has really changed and it's really not going to be okay and it's not going to work out with us, and tried and hung in there for a few years, but I basically ended up as a single mom. I couldn't bring myself to marry Sean yet again, despite being engaged a second time. And there I am with this little toddler and an older child, single again. I had a law practice that was going under financially. And what the hell? I am having the shitty B sobriety.
You had the B sobriety.
I didn't drink, and I'd go to a meeting, and I'd for a while, not going to very many, single mom of two, trying to work, all that stuff, all the excuses that aren't really excuses, but they do get in the way.
Yeah, I mean, there's shit that happens, and then we have to learn how to cope with that, right? So you're learning how to cope with that.
And you figure out how you're gonna still work a program, but it takes for those of us, I watch people fall to the side that don't ever get that. So I'm really, really grateful that for whatever reason that awesome foundation I laid down in AA would remind me. I never really left. I did get where I was very infrequent in my attendance, but all my friends are sober.
It's hard with little kids.
It is, and it was always at least in the back of my mind is I'm a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I never completely lost touch with AA. Even though there were a few times in my sobriety where I would go months without a meeting. Not very often, but it did happen.
Did you have a sponsor?
In name only, in the middle.
Got it.
I had, but so with the second divorce or whatever, with the first divorce, well, I wasn't married the second time, but with the first divorce, I ended up, really working another set of steps, and that helped a lot. Got a bunch of new sponsees. That was around 8 years of sobriety. So that boosted me back up. That's probably where I was when I met Sean again, right? Then after the second one, is when I moved down here to Santa Clara, and this has been the second renaissance of my sobriety these last 4 years, and it has not faded. It's only gotten more powerful.
Yeah.
But in these 4 years, I've had I guess I've lived here for 6 years. I've been at that job for 7.5 years, and I've probably had 4 or 5 significant romantic relationships that each one was very dramatic and lots of feeling, and that has been a big issue for me, right?
Yeah.
That we started out working because I was just so bottomed out on that experience of getting my hopes up and thinking
Right.
I'd made the connection and thinking it was finally going to be okay. Because I was finally going to have the right connection with someone that was going to be all right, and I wasn't going to be alone and struggling with all of this fear and responsibility. And it didn't work out again or whatever. And that was what drove me to my knees enough to get you and really sit down and just effing work the steps again.
And work the steps you did.
And I did.
My goodness. I've never seen anybody work the steps like you
do. It works. It works. It's like saves my sanity.
And honestly, that's like the gift of desperation, right? You were really, really committed out of desperation to change. I hope this doesn't sound shitty, but you really got busy and were so present and working your steps and consistent about doing your writing and your homework and the therapy and changing and committed to being present during difficult situations. And you lost a bunch of weight and completely changed the dynamic with you and your daughter. You and your daughter were struggling. You and your work life was challenging, and now, oh my God. So this is one of the things that I wanted to talk about with you is just that a lot of people are like on the cusp of a breakthrough, but outside looking in, I don't know how you feel. Maybe still, I don't know how you feel. That's your business. But watching you, it's like, oh my God, she did it. Like, it looks to me like you broke through like you had a breakthrough and you totally changed your life. You did so much work that you were able to like get to the other side. And now you were like blossoming into this new space, like not just metaphorically, but like physically, like this house that you're moving into. It's spacious. It's what you need and what you want. And the job is what you want. And your kids are stable. Like you got, like, you know what I mean? It's like everything has like gotten stable. And it's just been a fucking miracle to like, listen, you were like this magical person. Every time that we I walk away from a meeting with you, I'm just like, oh my God, she's fucking brilliant. And she's doing all this work and it's been magical to watch. It's amazing. So you're like, this is like one of our last meetings together face to face because you're moving. So when are you actually moving? In a couple weeks?
It's today is what? It's July 1st.
Is it? Yeah, okay, yeah.
I'm moving in 3 weeks. 3 weeks from today.
Yeah, you're going to be gone for a week. I'm going to be gone for a week.
Yeah, so this is our last... I'll probably see you tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
But that will be the last time I see you face to face for a while. For a little
Other
than FaceTime.
I know it.
Thank goodness for the internet. What does it say? Face to face or modem to modem?
That sounds dirty.
That's what it says in the forward to the fourth edition.
It's funny.
It's like modem to modem. It's already outdated. Modem. Right?
Let's not use technical terms, people.
Please, let's learn. Let's learn from our mistakes.
That's so funny.
But it's so funny to hear you like lay it all out like that because it makes me feel like some kind of superstar and
you kind of are in my world.
I mean it's like everything that has grown and that has gotten better and that has stabilized and that has like blossomed has all been out of the damn shit. I mean, that is like that they like the lotus flower is the symbol in Buddhism, right? And
Did I show you my tattoo?
Yes. It grows in shit, right? And you blossom where you're planted is right. It goes in the swamp or whatever, right? Yeah. It's like blossom where you're planted is that whole idea, and with addiction and overcoming compulsive eating and overcoming the need,
love addiction,
the need to smoke pot, which for me was like maybe the primary one, the need to drink, all of those, every one of them, it had to make me want to die, essentially. Yeah. I mean, the only reason I didn't really want to die around the love addiction or the food addiction is because I had my children, and so I didn't want to die because I don't even go there mentally. Them. Yeah, like I can't even really, but I wanted to not be anymore.
I know.
I wanted to be mentally gone. I wanted to be checked out, and every method of checking out just keeps failing me. So I think that's what they mean by the path narrows. Like there are fewer and fewer available ways to check out. The only way to really get any real relief for me is to check in, is to sit in it, to be in it, to connect with you, to connect with a sponsee, And it all sounds like so much fucking bullshit, I swear. But it is.
I know.
It only, like, I talk to people who know, because otherwise we all sound crazy. Like, no matter what my problem is, I have a solution.
Yeah.
And the things that you're saying, they're true. Like, I am so completely blown away by gratitude right now. I still manage to work up a little fear, but it's pretty pathetic in the face of my experience.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have to, I mean, I say I live in faith, but I don't have to, like, rely on faith that much. I rely on my actual
experience.
My experience. Like, there's this dude in San Francisco, Robert, who always used to say, I have a sober history. He always used to say, well, you know, I look behind me and I have a sober history. So when something is scary, or like, I'm about to move, change houses, change careers, move my kids into 2 new schools, all this stuff is happening, it has fallen into place like do. And I've tried to get a new job several times over the last 3 years. I've interviewed for several different positions. I've
that
applied.
Looked great.
Yep. I've applied for several more that I never got interviews for. None of those worked out, right? And I learned a long time ago in this program that rejection is God's protection. And I used to say it like whistling in the dark, rejection is God's protection, you know.
Yeah.
But like over time,
it
has been true. My
So
ex-wife
legit.
walked out on me, left me, told me, you know, I never really wanted you, that whole nonsense, right? And that was like, that crushed me. And I am so grateful today. She and I have a very good co-parenting relationship. I respect her and love her as a member of my family. We do our holidays together, but I am so grateful we're not married. We don't belong together as a couple. Right? And Sean and I, who I don't want to be romantic or sexual with anymore, and he doesn't with me, and he doesn't with anyone, so that's great. He's a monk. You know, we have a connection that is this like profound soul level love and support of one another. Kind of like what I would imagine I would have with a brother. But, you know, I don't have to worry about that being weird because he's not my brother, and we just aren't romantic. We don't have that anymore.
But
that
you guys love each other.
But we love the shit out of each other, and we really work hard at taking care of those kids. And I know that there's this other adult in the house who's that committed, who's that devoted to them, and also to me, to my well-being. He wants. You guys
are committed to each other's well-being, which is beautiful.
And so I'm like, oh well, if someone had told me when I first got sober that your sobriety story has you marrying someone that you're not in a romantic or sexual relationship with, but it's really good, I'd be like, no, I don't want that. That's not what I want. That's not the version I want. Right. I'm like, oh, I could not imagine something I would want more than this.
Isn't that amazing?
Maybe it's because I'm like a glutton and I want to be able to go have sex with whoever I want to go have sex with, you know? But it's not like I run off and go have sex with everybody. But like that little tickle is really minor relative to...
Yeah, it's not your driving force.
It's not my driving force. I think the addiction was to love. And, you know, for me now, sex is like other delightful, pleasant activities that I might
indulge in
with someone that I really like, a friend, and it's usually someone who lives far away, so there's no issues. And, you know, and that's it. Like it's like going and playing tennis with someone that I really, really like. And
what about wrestling?
You know, or maybe like a little wrestling match. Yeah, and it's great. It's super fun. It's nice, but it's not like a big life-changing thing.
It's not a thing.
And it's not selfish any more than playing tennis is. It's all very open.
Yeah.
But my primary relationship with an adult in an intimate fashion is my husband. And what the fuck?
Pretty cool.
So I gotta say, like, I would not have planned that. That is not how I would have laid it out.
Right.
And it is way better.
You are freer on like a whole nother level.
Yeah.
You have like complete freedom and peace.
I do. And I'm so grateful. And every time I have something that I don't seem to be able to work through myself, I am reminded that there's a solution. It always involves someone else helping me and me helping someone else.
Right.
Period.
It doesn't matter what the problem is, the solution is the same.
Yeah, it's my little quote.
You have another way of saying...
Yeah, this is from Cy Payne, who's a late beloved San Francisco AA who died with, 46 or 48 years or something like that a few years back. We both had January birthdays, so we'd always get our chips at the same time. And he was so awesome. He worked with newcomers like on his deathbed. And he used to say, the solution is simple, the solution is spiritual, the solution has absolutely nothing to do with the problem.
Yeah.
And it sounded like, what the hell? Until you think about it, like the solution to alcoholism has nothing to do with alcohol, right? It's like the solution to alcoholism and all the isms. It's why AA became, spread out to Gamblers Anonymous and Debtors and Love and Sex and OA, and is because the compulsive obsessive thing, like the obsession of the mind, the compulsion to do something or take something or have a compulsive conduct or whatever, that's the spiritual malady that we suffer from, right? It has a physical component, but we have this malady, and the solution to it is a spiritual solution. It's and it is pretty basic, and it is very straightforward, and it is not easy.
I was just going to say it's very difficult.
Right? So they say it's simple, but it's not easy. It's hard to get it's hard for me to get myself to do it. Even still, I'm resistant despite knowing, because that's what my makeup is. My makeup is still like, but I don't wanna.
But that's part of the human experience is that nobody wants to face their pain. Right. It's very difficult to face our pain, right? And sometimes we face our pain through alcohol. Some people drink to get in touch with it, which is interesting because they call alcohol spirits. Right. So there's some part of our psyche that is attracted to like spirits because something comes up out of us, that doesn't seem from us or of us, but
because we lock it down.
Yeah,
right?
But it's interesting that all the recovery stuff is all based on facing your pain with support, hence support group, and it's people, I think our society suffers from self-sufficiency. Right.
That's like the disease.
And even in sobriety, long-term sobriety, I occasionally suffer from self-sufficiency where I think that it's my job to solve my problem. And it's up to me to take responsibility for my problem, but typically the answer relies on a power greater than me, even if it's just two of us talking about my problem or me inviting God into the problem as I'm going through it.
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
The solution's the same.
The solution's the same every time. And I don't know why 20 years in that still surprises me, but I guess I'm happy it does, because that's actually really delightful to have that the solution still works. It works this way too.
And still after all this time.
And now I'm, really like in this sort of new thing with compulsive eating, with like trying to recovering through doing the steps in a very close way. So I'm doing these written 10th steps every day that I email off to this sponsor in
the OA program.
Yeah, and it's new, and it's really hard to get myself to. I don't wanna. I'm like grumble.
The book talks about rebellion. Dogs are every step.
Dogs are every step. Yeah. So, but yet it is. I'm watching it, and it is giving me that little hint, that little teeny glimmer of hope, like I had when I first got sober. Where I'm like, could this really just be like I could learn how to? It's not about trigger foods. It's not
about the problem.
It's not about the food. It's about the disease of compulsion that I have around how I eat. Yeah. So if I give that to God, and it's not magic, I do these things. Yeah. I resolutely turn to help someone else. Is there something I need to get off my chest immediately? If so,
where is my thinking selfish and self-centered
and dishonest
and
fearful, right? Yes.
And fearful.
Those are the things, and they are like resentment is our number one offender, and fear. It's the fabric of our lives is shot through with it, right? These things they're
driven by 1,000 forms of fear,
right? And that is like true, and so.
It's a thing.
The solution is simple. The solution is spiritual. The solution has absolutely nothing to do with the problem.
That is fucking beautiful. I think that's a great place to wrap up, don't you?
Yes.
Listen, I am excited for your new chapter. I will stalk you if necessary, which I don't think it is. But listen, thank you for sharing. That was really beautiful. You've come through so much, and maybe there is a chance for a C story, right? Where after the B story, you can have a C story.
That's so great that you said that, because Liz, the woman who carried the message to me, what she used to say whenever I would like bring up a dilemma, I always had all these dilemmas, she'd go, what if there's a third thing that you don't even know about?
Yeah.
So that's awesome.
Yeah, and that's always been my experience, is I think, my thinking is so black and white. I think the outcome is either going to be A or B. Right. And oftentimes it's something that I hadn't even considered, but that's why I seek help, and you know what I mean?
Yes.
I know you do. So listen, I love you with all my heart. I'm excited for you, and thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me.